Given the extraordinary and temporary nature of these measures, the government proposes to fund the COVID-19 resilience package through a draw on our past reserves. Putting together the proposed draw of up to $11 billion in FY 2021 and the $42.7 billion of past reserves that we now expect to draw in FY 2020, the total expected draw on past reserves over FY 2020 and FY 2021 will be up to $53.7 billion. I'll reread that. Putting together the proposed draw of up to $11 billion in FY 2021 and the $42.7 billion of past reserves that we now expect to draw in FY 2020, the total expected draw on past reserves over FY 2020 and FY 2021 will be up to $53.7 billion. This is a net increase of $1.7 billion from what we expected to draw from past reserves to respond to the crisis. The President has given her in-principle support for the proposed draw of up to $11 billion on past reserves in FY 2021 to continue the provision of public health care and relief measures in the coming financial year. Once again, I thank the President for her support. This is the second consecutive financial year where we will be drawing on our past reserves. This is necessary, given the exceptional circumstances we are in. We are extremely fortunate to be able to tap on our strategic assets and deploy the resources required to deal decisively with COVID-19 and the considerable uncertainties that lie ahead. We should never take our reserves for granted. In the coming years, our fiscal situation is expected to be tighter. Prior to COVID-19, we were already expecting a structural increase in our recurrent spending needs, especially in areas such as healthcare. We have tripled our government spending on healthcare within a decade, from $3.7 billion in FY 2010 to $11.3 billion in FY 2019. Fellow Singaporeans have often expressed the desire to better care for our seniors with quality yet affordable health and aged care services. This is possible only if we can muster the resources to do so. As our needs grow, we must plan for the resources to fund this and target the spending in a fair and effective way. COVID-19 has also raised economic uncertainties for citizens and workers, which calls for stronger social safety nets to protect those who are disadvantaged or more vulnerable. This will mean higher recurrent spending going forward. We have maintained the principle that recurrent expenditure should be funded by recurrent revenue. This ensures that we spend in a responsible way, one that is fair for current and future generations. To finance our recurrent spending needs, I first announced in Budget 2018 that we will need to raise the GST rate sometime from 2021 to 2025. As announced in the Unity Budget in February 2020, in view of economic conditions then, the GST rate increase would not take effect in 2021. This remains our plan. However, we will not be able to put off the increase for too long. We have to make the move sometime during 2022 to 2025, and sooner rather than later, subject to the economic outlook. Without the GST rate increase, we will not be able to meet our rising recurrent needs, in particular healthcare spending. While we are fortunate to be able to tap on our reserves to respond to the COVID-19 crisis, it is not tenable for the government to run persistent budget deficits outside periods of crisis. No finance minister likes to talk about tax increases, certainly not when the pandemic is still raging around the world. But we do this because we plan for the long term and do not shy away from explaining to fellow citizens why we need to make tough but necessary decisions to ensure that we have enough to provide for our nation's future. Let me reiterate my commitment to all that the government will ensure that our overall taxes and transfer system remains fair and progressive. GST on publicly subsidized education and healthcare will continue to be fully absorbed. And to help cushion the impact when the GST rate is raised, we have set aside $6 billion for an assurance package. This will effectively delay the effect of the GST rate increase for the majority of Singaporean households by at least 5 years. For lower-income Singaporeans, the offset will be even higher, with those living in 1 to 3 room HDB flats receiving about 10 years' worth of additional GST expenses incurred. Over and above the transitional support, we already have the permanent GST voucher scheme to defray GST expenses for lower and middle-income households. This is a permanent feature of our system and will be enhanced when the GST rate increase takes place. Through this scheme, we are able to provide targeted support for those who need help most. Based on past collections, foreigners residing in Singapore, tourists, and the top 20% of resident households are estimated to account for over 60% of the net GST borne by households and individuals. This is after taking into account the GST voucher scheme and the GST refunded under the tourist refund scheme for goods bought locally for consumption abroad. If you consider our entire system of taxes and benefits, it is a progressive one. In 2020, the top 20% of Singaporean households paid 56% of the taxes and received 11% of the benefits, whereas the bottom 20% paid 9% of the taxes and received 27% of the benefits.